So welcome again. This is for the county's Spending Affordable Advisory Committee. We are very pleased to meet today, and we're going to concentrate the next 2 hours actually on education, which is our number one priority for the budget. So we're very happy to welcome our school leaders team, and they're going to do a presentation of about 45 minutes, including Q&A, to talk about the superintendent's proposed budget that's including operating and CIP. It's obviously a very important and informative topics for the committee. And following that, we will have Yusuf, who is a education advisor for the county executive, and he's going to provide a briefing on the blueprint work group and the initial findings and recommendations here. And then our friends from the library, Angela and Tanya, are going to do a presentation for our school system regarding their budget situation. And also Jared Carter from our community college will be doing a presentation from a communication for the Howard County Community College. So we have very packed but also very important agenda today. I want to start by thanking all the team from our education entities there to be here today to talk about this subject there. With that, I'll hand it over to our school system. Let me see whether I can successfully have this run on the school side. Yeah, perfect. So are you able to enlarge that a little bit, Darren? Okay, yeah, it works very well. Thank you. Bill, your call. Thank you very much.
Right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Honored to be here with the committee and presenting information about both our operating and capital budgets today. My name is Bill Barnes. I am the acting superintendent for the school system, and I want to also recognize Dr. Turner Little, our deputy superintendent, Mr. Conforti, our executive director for budget, and our acting chief operating officer, Dan Lubley, he'll be presenting with me for the back half of this presentation for the capital portion today. So thank you again for the time that we have with you today. We'll certainly be efficient and respectful of that time. I certainly encourage you to visit our website, www.hcpss.org, should you want more detailed information regarding our FY 2025 operating budget. There you'll find the full 600-page budget document, but also in sometime today, we're going to publish a toolkit on the website and share with our Board of Education and other stakeholder groups that elevates the critical information from our budget. So really an easier to digest version of that big bulky budget. So as I mentioned, I'll take a few minutes to present some slides related to our operating budget, and then I'll kick it over to Mr. Lubley, who will talk more about the capital budget. So during my budget presentation, which took place last Thursday, the 18th of January, I presented our fiscal reality and explaining that the cost for our existing services and the budget growth needed to meet mandated and priority expenditures are growing much faster than the required revenues to support them. And we began recognizing that we had $32.1 million deficit that was due largely to the use of one-time funds in last year's budget. And the deficit is compounded by a $71.7 million of increased expenditures necessary for mandates and priorities. And when you take these two together, that reflects a $103.8 million gap that must be overcome to balance the budget. I also propose to our Board of Education, to our public, a way that we could make up this gap, which includes asking the county for $47 million in above maintenance of effort funding, which is consistent with the new money that was provided last year, using the anticipated remaining $10.2 million of available fund balance, and then of course making the difficult decisions to identify $46.6 million in budget reductions to existing non-mandated services. So in total, the proposed FY 2025 operating budget comes in at $1.13 billion, which reflects a $25.1 million or 2.3% increase in expenditures above FY 2024. The challenge we face as we aim to balance the budget stem from the confluence of multiple factors on both revenue and expenditure sides of the budget, but they're not unlike what the state and the other school districts in Maryland are currently facing. So the recommendation contained in this budget proposal represent our collaborative, strategic, forward-thinking work over the past several months to balance the budget based on revenue assumptions and current information available to us. And I would like to take just a second to point out the interrelationship for instructive purposes. So, you'll notice that the three figures below the colored diagram, the 47 million above MOE request from the county, the 10.2 million use of fund balance, 46.6 million in reduction to existing services, that reflects our strategy for closing that gap. And we have been working with stakeholders to help them understand that these, all of these numbers on the screen may change as we get better information, and they're interrelated. So, for example, if we were to get additional funding from the county over what is being asked, that would influence how we might apply fund balance or reduce reductions. If we were to receive less funding, or if the board were to work with us and the budget might be adjusted, then we might have to make additional reductions to services. And I think that's pretty straightforward and people understand that, but it is worth pointing out as we try to gain clarity on this through this budget season. So I also want to share that, put a little more energy around explaining why we find ourselves at this crossroads with this $103 million budget gap at this point in time. First, our reliance on the use of one-time funding over a period of several years have delayed decisions that we must now make since the same amount of fund balance is no longer available. Much of that one-time funding was found in fund balance, and we are definitely not at the same levels we have been in the past. The formulas that determine state and county funding provide more than 95% of operating revenues, but are not growing as much as the cost they are intended to support, because the formulas are primarily tied to enrollment, not to the changes in cost to deliver public education. Again, a trend that we can see as I meet with my fellow superintendents across the state. Maintenance of effort funding is declining due to our decreasing enrollments, which we'll take a look at in just a second, which means that there's less required funding from the county. And while the revenues are decreasing, the cost to operate the school system are growing in areas including health insurance, blueprint mandates, as well as other priorities. And so while this is a difficult budget season, we need to make significant changes now so that we're putting the school system on a more fiscally sustainable path, not just for the coming year, but beyond, as we continue to see mandated increases year over year. We've heard from our state and county funding partners, and with recommendations to look at non-mandated funding and requirements in our current budgets with existing programs, and really we're doing the hard work of reallocating funds when possible. And that is exactly what we've done, bringing forward these, a much more reasonable request for funding than has been the case in years past. And I want to emphasize that this budget in its current stage, as I've handed it off to the Board of Education, and we work together to bring one forward at the end of February, represents just one scenario for balancing a budget. You'll see in this chart that student enrollment rose significantly for several years, and then has fallen off quite considerably since the pandemic, and levels haven't recovered. And so this decline in enrollment, and this is just a visual way to reflect it, has had an impact on the funding we receive as a system at the same time as costs have increased. And I brought forward this, one scenario for balancing a budget that considers both our expenditures with respect to revenue assumptions based on prior year funding. And this is an effort, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, to put forward a budget that has a higher likelihood of being funded without further reductions. The budget includes $71.7 million in new costs and 132.3 new positions. A little less than half of these new positions are tied primarily to pre-kindergarten expansion requirements related to the blueprint for Maryland's future. And the majority of the remaining positions are added for special education, but still many of those special education positions are also tied to our pre-kindergarten programming related to blueprint for Maryland's future. And so, and the others are allocated or requested being added to ensure students receive the high quality mandated services they both deserve and require. The drivers behind increasing costs will be represented on the following slides, and are all increases we support. And it's important that we understand that each of these reflects categories that are essential services to our students and staff. So in short, as we've gone through this process, we've been asking, how does this budget serve our students? How do these increases serve our students well? And our expanding increased costs fall into three categories that we'll see as we move forward: legal mandates, contractual commitments, and priorities. So in terms of legal mandates, these are accounted for in the proposed budget and all tied to Blueprint for Maryland's Future. And these include some of those that you see on the screen, including pre-kindergarten expansion, some instructional technology funding, national board certification pay increases, and so on. Contractual commitments or changes made in the budget to support costs to existing obligations such as contracts and prior negotiated pay and benefits. And you'll see the $19.7 million projection for financial obligations, including the vast majority of that being reflected in an $18.6 million increase in health insurance and a $1.1 million increase in other insurance, a $9 million increase in student transportation costs, and other related positions, including those connected with Guilford Park High School's 11th grade, adding 11th graders to that school. Priorities represent those budget items that support existing policy, define goals and objectives, and specific issues. Some of those in our budget you'll see reflected on the screen, including a $25.8 million marker for employee compensation increases, 51.5 new positions for special education, increased utility costs, and then we also have to count for this year of expiring COVID grants, with the caveat that next year we'll see a more dramatic decrease of funding related to those grants or the expiration of those grants, and some other items that you can see on the screen here. So to help offset some of the cost increases to budget additions and to put forward a county funding request that is consistent with last year's new funding amount of $47 million, my proposed budget includes $46.6 million in budget reductions to existing services, which include a reduction of 347.85 or 348 existing positions. These reductions will affect both school-based and non-school-based services and staff. Programmatic school-based reductions amount to $24.6 million and 245.8 existing positions. A portion of these reductions include $9.5 million and 144.9 existing positions as a result of increasing class size ratios by 2 at all levels. Programmatic non-school-based reductions account for $22 million or 102.05 positions. And during the upcoming Board of Education work sessions, staff will present information on expenditure requests as well as reduction recommendations to discuss their impacts, both the service impact and personnel impacts. Division summaries will be found in the budget book, will also be pulled out and be part of our toolkit, like foreshadowed, to provide greater detail as well as the impact statements to foster understanding of just what all of these reductions mean. None of these decisions regarding reductions to existing programs or people were made lightly, nor were they easy. And they were done with great thought and consideration for the overall operational impact to the school system. It's also important to note that the proposed FY 2025 operating budget is based on revenue assumptions and information that we have right now. There are three primary sources of revenue, and all of them can and will likely change between now and May, and some, in fact, already have begun to change. And so they include the amount of maintenance of effort that we are requesting from the county, the use of unassigned fund balance, and the state aid. And that's what I was reflecting to as we're just beginning to receive and get our heads around the preliminary estimates. We anticipate having more information related to and publishing more information about state aid during our February 29th work session. And we're going to continue to have regular conversations with the county executive, county council, to better anticipate the amount of maintenance of effort we can expect to receive. Unassigned fund balance is based on the audited amount as of June 30th. And we will have an additional update in the spring when we finalize our cost to complete process. It's critically important that we build confidence in this budget process, and that confidence will be earned through consistent and transparent communications. And so, as revenue assumptions become clearer, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that our board, our stakeholders, our county partners are informed of those changes, and we will do so primarily through communication each and every budget work session. We'll begin those work sessions with a quick update of those revenue estimate changes, and we'll also be communicating those to our partners through memos and other correspondence. So this concludes my part of this FY 2025 proposed operating budget presentation, and I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Lubley, who's the acting chief operating officer, to provide information about our capital budget and long-range master plan. So Mr. Lubley.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. So just like the operating budget, our other budget that the school system has is our capital budget. It is primarily funded through two major sources, which is our local, our county, and our state capital improvement program. There are intermittent state funding sources, but the two primary sources of revenue are the county and the state CIP funding. As we can see in this graphic, our needs or capital needs often outweigh the funding sources that we do receive each fiscal year. One of the largest challenges that we have with the capital budget is balancing the growing capital or physical needs of the school system with the fiscal constraints that is presented to us each fiscal year. So I'd like to take a look at the two primary factors in our capital budget. First, we'll look at our needs. What are our capital needs? As Mr. Barnes indicated earlier, we have seen a very steep incline with student enrollment over the years. While it has shown to level off, the capacity needs for the school system have not gone away. There are still capacity needs throughout the entire school system, which must be addressed through the capital budget. The blueprint, while it affects the operating budget, also affects the capital budget, as there are requirements for full-day pre-K as well as CTE requirements. We also address program initiatives such as special education growth, mental health, and program growth. And with existing physical assets, we always have to keep in mind the maintenance of our assets, modernization, and our deferred maintenance, our comprehensive maintenance plan, as well as our state assessments and reviews, which come in each year. The other factor, which is in the capital budget, is our funding. As we can see here on this chart, since fiscal year 2020 or 2018, the cost for construction has increased 52%. These are the state numbers for new facilities or facilities for renovation. They have increased 52% since fiscal year 2018. This, in the same time, we are looking at an anticipated static annual capital improvement plan funding of approximately $75.8 million. That is approximately 50 to 54 million locally and 21.8 million from the state. There are a lot of variables that come into play with that 21.8 million available state funding through the CIP as well. One of the largest intermittent funding sources from the state is the Build to Learn Act funding. Currently, it is anticipated that Howard County currently has approximately $75.5 million remaining in the Build to Learn Act funding balance. An important factor to remember with both the CIP funding and Build to Learn Act is that they do require a local match. In fact, all current state funding sources, except for the one-time pass-through grant, the aging school program, and the school security grant program, both of which are legislated to be sunset after fiscal year 26. But all current state funding sources, other than those three, do require the local match for eligible items. Another factor that comes into play when we take a look at the state share is how our state share of funding is going to be decreasing. For the current fiscal year 2024, our state share for eligible items is 56% with a local share of 44. In fiscal year 25, that will be decreasing to 54% state and 46% local. And in 26, decreasing to 51% state and 49% local. As we look forward to the capital budget, we look at our long-range master plan, which is the board proposed long-range master plan approved on November 16th. We can see in fiscal year 2025, our total request to both the county and the state is just over $75 million. As we look to the future for fiscal years 28 through fiscal years 34, we can see that the annual request will range from approximately $89.5 million to $139.5 million. We can anticipate that the cost of construction will continue to rise as inflation, the outfall from the pandemic, and just standard industry practices continue. And this concludes our capital budget. I would like to turn it back over to Mr. Barnes.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mr. Lubley, and committee members for giving us your time this afternoon. And before we turn it back over, we're certainly prepared to respond to any questions, I do want to make a comment on kind of acknowledge and try to underscore the toll that this process is taking on staff who were impacted. As you can imagine, this is the first time in recent memory, or anybody's recent memory that I can speak with, that we have set out to engage in this level of work at this time of year. And so it's emotionally quite taxing on the system and community as we work through it. I try to remind folks that this is a process, and that our job is to make sure that people have the support they deserve as they work through the process, and that stakeholders have answers to questions that they might have, especially related to developing an understanding of why we find ourselves in this position and how we might move forward together. So I'm grateful for the opportunity here. I'm grateful for our partners at the county who have committed to working to understand and support us through the process. I'm completely committed to that partnership and providing anyone and everyone, but especially our county partners, with the information needed to make smart decisions. And that includes, I also want to acknowledge our Board of Education, who is, we're working together through this process. And they understand the gravity of the work, and are committed also to putting together long-term strategies that help these budget seasons become a little less onerous and difficult. So thanks to everyone. We'll pause and respond to whatever questions you may have.
Thank you very much. I really very much appreciative of our school partners for both information and also the willingness to do a collaborative, sustainable approach for the budget development. So any committee members, if you want to ask a question, just unmute yourself. We're a little bit casual here, so please.
Hey, Holly, it's Steve.
Go ahead.
Quick question. Been on the committee for a number of years, and this isn't the first time that we've kind of had this conversation where one-time funds have been used to cover the growing, stretching needs of the school system, unable to get the funding from the county or other funding partners in order to kind of support the growth. But as we come into a kind of a post pandemic world where enrollment is down, we still see high numbers on school construction, and we still see high numbers of fund balances. I mean, I'm thinking back from 10 11 years ago where this started to come out as an issue before. As you're looking at the long-term planning and the Board of Education is having conversations around this, what can we do to kind of stop the investment before there's funding and revenue available, especially when it seems like maybe it's not as needed in certain areas? I mean, it's not a loaded question. I'm just trying to understand, like, in business, I can't go spend, hundreds of millions of dollars that I don't have. I have to go figure out where the revenue is coming from first. So just trying to figure that out and figure out how we can help the community understand in the total spend that the county is going through, how do we balance those things?
Darren, you may have some insights to parts of that question. Steve, I really appreciate the question. I think that part of that is really developing a shared understanding of what those revenue expenditures are, being from a school system standpoint, doing a better job of communicating exactly what our needs are relative to this, particularly as we have the blueprint for Maryland's future, which, we're confronting over the next several years of implementation. I think part of it is level setting and committing to multi-year processes instead of what feels like year-over-year, single-year processes. We've met with our county partners, this morning to begin to express a willingness for that and to set in place some structures for how that might happen. So structurally, I think having a partnership in place is step one. And then there's so much information and misinformation about the blueprint for Maryland's future, which by the way, is a really good piece of legislation for children. And it's what's frustrating educators is the mismatch between sort of the funding models, and you pair that with some rhetoric that is sort of undercutting all of this. It's become a thing that I don't want to paint with a negative picture. Investing in students' needs at the pre-kindergarten level is a research affirmed best practice and can curb the need for additional expenditures on the back end, whether it's intervention or special programs. So it's not, the blueprint isn't the problem, it's how are we going to pay for it. So I think, Steve, first of all, structurally, we need to go forward differently together than we have, because what we've done is not produce the results that have avoided situations like this. Darren, do you have anything that from a technical side that might add something to that?
I will say real quick before Darren, you get into that, I appreciate the fact that you're looking at as a long-term plan as opposed to an annual plan, because that's something that if you read previous committee reports, that's kind of been a thing we've been looking for, because we know that'll help. So applaud you for going down that road.
Thank you.
And Bill, I think what I could add to that from the technical level for the committee's benefit, and I thank Steve for the question, because it's the recognition of the very dilemma of using one-time monies for recurring costs that has really informed the budget strategy that we've brought forward this year. And that really requires that the information be presented in such a manner that people have clear choices between how we associate recurring revenues to support the services we want to see ongoing. And so that was really a key part of what we heard from the county and from the board last year, is provide us the information to help us make the choices that we know are going to be sustainable choices. And the timing of it is not coincidental. The pandemic and the decreased expenditure activity that we saw during the early days of the pandemic when we were in virtual instruction status, and the massive influx of federal relief monies to help address recovery of learning and PPE and all the various other things we dealt with during the pandemic, those allowed for us to accrue a fund balance that served as a bridge to help implement the blueprint when the recurring revenues were not growing fast enough to do the implementation. But now those fund balances are diminishing. The audited fund balance, as Mr. Barnes explained, is down to about $10.2 million as of June 30th. That's much lower than the $30 million we were carrying a few years ago. So the moment in time to lift up those clear choices is now, so that we can make sustainable funding decisions that are associated with sustaining the services that we want, as an education system here in Howard County.
I have a question, and first I just want to thank you both for a very detailed presentation. It was helpful to see a kind of a breakdown in the trends that you highlighted. And just kind of building off of, I think, the question that Steve had, as we look to long-term trends in the county, I'd be curious if you could dive a little deeper into the enrollment decline. I think Mr. Barnes mentioned that this is a statewide issue. We're not unique, but it'd be interesting to know how we compare to other counties and what you identify as the drivers of that trend. Because if that becomes a long-term trend, that's something we're going to have to reconcile. I think maybe somewhat related to that, but a more specific question. One number that jumped out to me in your presentation was the increase in the cost of student transportation, which comes amid that enrollment decline. And I know as the school system has, made several efforts to change, busing for school. So if you could dive into those 2 points, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much for the question. I can answer part of it a little bit, and and some of it is still. I can't speak to enrollment decline trends as well as Mr. Lubley can in terms of project, development and so forth. We know that we saw some pullback in enrollment as we shifted to virtual learning, stayed there a little longer than our neighbors, and heard some feedback from families that they would put their students in some private schools that were meeting their students face to face. I don't think, but as we come out of that bubble, I don't think that's the cause of why we stayed that way. So I'm curious as to whether or not, if Mr. Lubley can't answer that now, we'll get an answer to that question for you. As well as to the second part with transportation, and Mr. Conforti or Mr. Lubley can offer some more detail to this. I think that what we're experiencing I think what our contractors are experiencing are rising costs in what it means to pay a bus driver, what it means to provide benefits if some contractors provide those, and some of those costs have been passed along to us, and we continue to work to see efficiencies. Another driver in that space is, while enrollment remains stagnant, our enrollment for students who require special education services has not remained stagnant. We continue to have increases in enrollment, in service enrollment for students that require additional support. And many of that, often that additional support falls into the area of specialized transportation as a related service. And when we are busing students to non-public placements or to different parts of the county outside of their home school zone so they can be served in a regional program, that those are much more significant because of economies of scale. You have smaller numbers of students on buses and pushing them around the county to different places, or even sometimes out of the county in non-public spaces. But Darren or Dan, do you have any other thoughts as to transportation and/or enrollment trends?
Certainly, sir. I can touch on the enrollment trends a little bit here. I think you covered very well some of the factors that we saw coming out of the pandemic. It is not solely related to Howard County. I do believe it is across the entire state and really the nation. Beyond that, while that does provide a factor, it's not the only limiting factor. It has been seen across the nation that birth rates have been declining for several years, and the pandemic has brought that along as well. So that is something that we have seen, our neighboring LEAs have seen, and has been substantiated at the state as well, is to see those birth rates. And as Mr. Barnes pointed out, there was an influx of parent and family choice to their education as they were coming out of, or in, and then coming out of the pandemic situation.
And I would build on what Mr. Lubley just said, because I think he summarized very accurately some of the information that was shared with this committee 2 presentations ago regarding sort of future demographic trends within the county. And our own enrollment projections right now show that we're not likely to recover to an enrollment level that eclipses the pre-pandemic level for at least another 2 or 3 years. And then beyond that, that enrollment level looks to remain relatively flat going into the future. And this is a key factor that relates into what we talk about as the structural deficit that we're faced with, because enrollment is the underlying variable from which all state formula aid and county required fundings is calculated. So if that number is stagnating, then those revenues are also going to stagnate. But interconnecting this with the transportation cost challenges, right, which is basically like a cost of business increase that we've seen, a cost increase partly attributable to market disruption that the pandemic put into bus drivers, as well as volatile fuel costs for operating the buses. All of that is contributed to like higher operating costs in just that one area. That's just our student transportation area. Yet the funding streams are not going in the same direction. And so this is going to be the ongoing conversation that you're going to be hearing from the school system and the board and working with our county partners about how we manage the fiscal stability of the school system to continue providing, education needs as we go forward. So with that, I don't know if Dan or Bill, if you wanted to add anything extra.
No, let's save some time for some additional questions if there are any.
It's Ellen. Hello, Dr. Barnes. I have a question just about the fact we're talking about the one-time funding and the increase from the feds, but realistically for the 3 pandemic years, we were receiving, I still think of it as we're receiving funding at the pre-pandemic level. Our enrollment was counting at the 2019 levels for 3 solid years, and that was both at the state and the county level. So the impact of the continued decrease in enrollment was, we didn't have to deal with it until this current year, and we're seeing, continued impact of that next year. That's concerning also, as we're still seeing capital projections for increased construction, which is not just based on pre-K pieces. The other is that I have trouble understanding how an increase of 2 students per class, the savings for that can offset the fact that now you've overpopulated schools at that rate, because capacity is based on teacher ratios and enrollment. So are we looking at re-examining? It seems to me that it's imperative that we re-examine the capacities of our schools in light of the different kinds of services we're providing. Not just the increase on one end, but at the high school level, the increase in dual enrollment, the increase in technology assisted opportunities, the required increase in apprenticeships and CTE offerings that will put kids out, and the fact that the change in the curriculum requirements for graduation don't require seniors to carry a full load in the senior year. And especially as you're looking at increasing the student ratio to teachers, technically that would increase the capacity in the school, but we're still looking at increased building, and we're looking at continued decline in enrollment, or at the very best scenario almost is stagnation. So I'm just making sure that those are questions that we're looking at and reflecting in how we look at how this expansion of services at one end and an adjustment of services at the other, and the increase of technology in helping us do some of the things that don't necessarily require classroom space, how we're adjusting to all this. Because we haven't really looked at how we determine school capacity in 25 years. It's still defined as it was before. So just a question. I can't hear you.
Mr. Barnes, I can go ahead and step in for a moment.
Okay.
That's a very well thought out, very detailed variables that you point out, Mrs. Giles. I will indicate that our Office of School Planning actually is in the process right now with a third party of reviewing the board's methodology for capacity for our schools. So that is a process that is currently going on. It's just at the beginning stage, but it's something that we will continue to work with Mr. Barnes and our Board of Education. I do appreciate all the factors that you are pointing out in your question that do play a role in a lot of the decisions and how we look at the capacity for our schools.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
sorry.
I just wanted to bring them up. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to get cut off. And Ellen, I'm glad you can always use that pronoun we. I mean, once in the family that way, always in the family that way, in my opinion. Thank you for talking about the hold harmless legislation around that locked us into the enrollment revenue. Yes, that was an oversight not to mention that, and we haven't really amplified that in the same way in any of the presentations. So it's a good piece of advice. And what you really, with a like sort of almost a forensic way uplifted, was the way we think about high school staffing in general. You know, we haven't necessarily been sensitive enough in our high school staffing to think about the impacts of dual enrollment and career, you know, what the state is putting forward for career and technical education internships, getting students outside of the school in their 12th grade year to really get a pre-career, pre-college experience. That's the intent of that legislation. And I don't suspect I'll learn more in this role, you know, and I'll be asking questions along those lines as we head into staffing. How have we controlled for that? Because if we're still staffing as if all those kids are taking 7 periods a day in our classroom, well, there's an opportunity not to create, you know, going with such significant reductions. So very much appreciated, and you're thinking alongside with me. And I'm sorry I dropped off for a second.
No, that's okay. It's just things I wanted to throw into the mix because a lot has happened and it hasn't always emanated from the same point. So, I mean, this is how I think, however, I build a big picture, right? So I just wanted to point out some things that I think do need to be considered. And it's to all of our advantage to do that and look at what, you know, if we're talking about 45% of students graduating with professional certification at some level, then we're going to be looking at a variety of different delivery systems in order to make that work. And that's going to start at middle school level. It's not going to start just at high school. So it's a secondary issue which has to be introduced in elementary. So that long-term planning, I'm really grateful to hear that. And just to throw some things into the mix because I'm still interested.
Much appreciated, and thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'll just add one, maybe we move on to next speaker. Again, thank you very much. This is a great conversation. We really think it's a good approach there. One question kind of related to, we had early conversation earlier today regarding positions there. In the slides they're shown earlier, we talk about tentative proposal was assuming 347 reduction positions as well as 132 new positions. So the question is, how many vacancies do you have? How would you be able to shift around, train people, repurpose some of the staff there to minimize impact on employee?
Well, thank you so much. And Mr. Conforti, I'll just prime you to give the specific numbers. As we went through the process of proposing reductions, our team did think about all of that low-hanging fruit first. Where do we have existing current vacancies, and also where do we have trends in vacancies that are resulting from a tight labor market? So, for example, in special education, if we still haven't been able to hire a number of positions, say 15, how do we factor for that, knowing that even though we might need more, the candidates may not be there, and it would be irresponsible to go forward with the full ask in that regard. So we did try to control for some of that, or make an estimation that was, more different than just putting the full ask in. Of the 352 existing positions, I think about 38 of them are currently vacant of the ones that are requested for reduction. And the rest are filled with either specific people in specific positions or by people that will be identified later in a process as we go through staffing and surplus. Many of those folks, many of those 348 positions are resulting from that class size increase of 2. And so, when you pair that against a pretty typical average of us hiring between 300 and 400 brand new teachers each year to replace those who are retired or resigned educators, we're confident but cannot guarantee that all of the people in certificated positions will find a job available to them in the school system. We cannot guarantee it, but we're confident that it can happen. And then there are other positions that we talked about this morning that are not vacant and are filled with employees for whom there's not yet an obvious landing space. These are non-certificated staff. And so as we approach May and we understand our numbers with greater precision and certainly our funding levels, it is possible that those folks will experience, as a county, will experience reduction in force, and those folks will be looking for employment elsewhere. And that's part of the reason we wanted to go through this process in January, giving any impacted employee, a little over 5 months, 5.5 months to consider the impact. Gives us time to support them in their pursuit of a different position, and also whether that's inside or outside. So Darren, can you tighten up the numbers to Holly's question?
Sure can, Mr. Bonds. Holly, as Mr. Bonds mentioned, with roughly 348 positions that are proposed to be reduced in this budget, and 38 is the number of those that were identified as occupied at the point that we put the budget together. Now, the school system is it's the largest employer in Howard County. We employ more than 9,000 people, and vacancies are dynamic, and we know they're going to change between now and July, and that'll factor into how we manage the impacts of these position reductions. On any given time during the fiscal year, and we've included this information now in our monthly budget to actual report, we report the number of vacancies that we have. And so right now that number is fluctuating somewhere between like 220 and 250 on any given month. And we'll be putting out the latest version of that data in the month of February. So that as that vacancy number and the certain positions that become vacant over the next few months, that'll help with the management of the impact of the proposed position reductions on any particular employee.
Thank you very much, the entire school team. We very much appreciate the information the committee is going to find is very useful, very informative, and also we love the collaborative and openness. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sun, and we will be here for the committee and to your team as we move through the process. And have a good afternoon.
Same to you. Thank you. Our next speaker will be Yusuf. He's going to provide an update to the blueprint, just related to the education discussion there. So Yusuf.
Hi, Holly. Can I just share my screen? I think that would be easier.
So our IT host, could you provide Yusuf ability to share his screen?
Yeah, just FYI, Yusuf, all panelists currently in the room are able to use the share function on the bottom of the screen.
Great.
So on the middle, you should be able to hit that and hopefully share screen.
All right, thank you.
Just give me a second here. There we go. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, members. My name is Yusuf Ahmed, and I'm the Senior Advisor for Education Policy and Performance for County Executive Ball, and I'm also the designated staff member to the Blueprint Planning Resources Work Group. The 14-member multi-agency work group includes representatives from the Howard County government, Howard County Community College, the Howard County Library System, the Howard County Board of Education, the Howard County Council, and the Howard County State Delegation, as well as community members. The Blueprint Work Group has 5 primary duties and responsibilities: to review the statutory funding requirements of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future in each pillar area and identify critical deadlines to meet the key priorities of the plan. We are to establish a cost analysis of each pillar for each of the next 7 fiscal years beginning in FY25, to continue to work with the Maryland State Department of Education and the Department of Legislative Services to forecast future state aid distributions, to work with the Howard County Office of Budget and the Howard County Public School System to forecast sustainable local funding estimates for education for each of the next 7 fiscal years, and then finally to recommend a funding plan and policy actions that may be needed at the local and state level to implement the blueprint within local and state budget estimates. Today, I'll run through the 5 pillar areas of the blueprint rather quickly, as I know that we're running up on time for each one of the speakers, and to review with you the spending recommendations that the work group has agreed upon for FY25. Now, starting with Pillar 1 with early childhood education, it calls for a significant expansion, full-day pre-K to be free for all 3 and 4-year-olds from low-income households and available to all other 4-year-olds with fees set by a sliding scale. To create a public funding for public school-based and community-based pre-K programs, to substantially increase the supply of early childhood education teachers through tuition assistance and financial support, and to expand both PADI centers for pre and postnatal support and Judy centers. Moving on to teachers and leaders in Pillar 2, to make the teaching profession a high status profession by raising the pay and status of teachers, including a performance-based career ladder, a minimum statewide salary, and salaries comparable to similarly educated professionals. Pillar 3, focusing on college and career readiness, to establish internationally recognized and benchmark curriculum that enables students to achieve college and career ready status and pathways by the end of grade 10, and developing a fully aligned instructional system, including curriculum frameworks, syllabi assessments, clear examples of standard setting work, and formative assessments to keep students on track. Pillar 4, focusing on more resources for students to significantly increase funding for special education to improve outcomes, additional funding for English learners, and to support broad and sustained academic, social service, health and behavioral health supports and services for students in schools that need them the most. Pillar 5 focuses on accountability, and this is largely the Accountability and Implementation Board to ensure oversight of the blueprint and blueprint dollars that are being distributed through state and local funding. I'm going to jump ahead because I know that I'm at 3:55 now, just to focus on the recommendations that the work group has agreed upon for FY25. In working to expand pre-kindergarten access to be free for all low-income 3 and 4-year-olds and available to all of the 4-year-olds, the work group have agreed upon that $3.5 million should be allocated towards the expansion of the remaining half-day classrooms to full day in all elementary schools. On Pillar 2, subject to collective bargaining, the work group recommends that an adequate funding amount be allocated in the FY25 operating budget to create and sustain a career ladder. And lastly, the blueprint requires specific technology investments to align with a mandated instructional model. Therefore, the work group recommends $3.5 million be allocated towards a per pupil investment of required technology costs. I'll stop there, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Thank you, Seth. That's very concise. Any questions from the committee regarding Blueprint? Okay. And Yusuf, I think the 3.5 million each for the pre-K requirement as well as the technology, that's in line with what the school system superintendent's current proposed budget, right? For the
Yeah,
blue.
yes. Current proposed budget has each of these recommendation. The funding amounts that were recommended are in line with the work group.
Wonderful. And do you want to talk about the next step of the blueprint workshop?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Holly. So we worked from July of 2023 till now to on the FY25 estimates. And then from now until the conclusion of the work group later this summer, we'll be focusing on the next 6 fiscal years to be able to give this committee, the county, the Board of Ed, and then the county council our recommendations for future funding forecasts and how much we deem appropriate for spending and what we think it will cost.
Thank you. I think that's an important point because as the acting superintendent just mentioned that, and also Steve pointed earlier that we have to all look at the long-term sustainability beyond just 1 year. So the blueprint and also the school's needs and the planning align with the revenue sources from the state and the local side, all going to be important and have to kind of get mingled together in sync. So that's a really good approach that the work group is going to look into that in the following months there. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the committee? Okay. Well, thank you. And we were going to move to the next speaker then. All right. I think Angela, you and Tanya are both here. Angela, Blake, do you want to run it from your screen for the school system, from the library system? Thank you. I couldn't hear clearly. Oh, Angela.
It may be your headset, Angela. We can't hear you well.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna let you start the slides, and I'll get started. I'm up first.
Thank you, Tanya.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me fine, Holly?
Yes, we can
Okay,
hear you.
Great. Good afternoon. I am Tonya Akins, President and CEO of Howard County Library System, and I'm accompanied by Angela Braid, your committee member and Chief Operating Officer of Support Services. I'm going to share just a high-level operational overview along with our FY25 operating request, and Angela will cover our capital request. We thank you for the opportunity to present this afternoon. Next slide, please, Angela. Did you get our slides up? Let's see if we can.
Just FYI, yeah, as of right now, there are no slides being shown. You'll have to use the share function on the bottom of the screen.
Okay.
So, Angela, do you want to try?
I thought we sent them to you all.
Oh, we can put on our screen. I just don't know whether you all want to run from your screen.
You can run it.
Let me do that.
Everybody's time. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks. Perfect. Okay. If you'll go to the next slide, please. Great. Thank you so much. Okay, HCLS provides services across 4 broad areas: self-directed education, research assistance and instructive and enlightening experiences, and community response and outreach. As one of the leading library systems in North America, we continue to experience very high engagement across all areas of service. Those services shown in red are where engagement is so high that we are severely stretched to keep pace or we're not meeting customer demand. And most are in that latter category. And as I look at this under our A+ partnership, these are the large events that we do in partnership with our school system. Battle of the Book should definitely be in red. The number of teams participating continues to grow each year, and we're just so incredibly grateful to Ian Kennedy and the DAC for the use of Merriweather for this event. And on that note, if any of you are available the evening of April 19th, we would greatly appreciate it if you would like to volunteer with us. We promise it'll be one of the best nights of your life. These things that are here in red are where we're seeing customer demand and deep wait lists, or we're actually turning people away with regard to their participation and engagement. Next slide, please. I did see on that last slide, and I didn't highlight it, that we are the only library system in Maryland that actually issues external high school diplomas, and this is in partnership with the state of Maryland Department of Education. And that program also experiences some deep wait lists. It's a beautiful thing. So if you ever want to come to a project literacy graduation and hear those stories of folks in our community, many of them educated in their home country, getting a high school diploma here, they are very heartwarming, and we're just happy to be able to assist with that. This slide shows some of our services in pictures. There we go. There are many more, but we continue to hear from folks. We didn't know the library did that or this, whatever that thing may be, but we do see that high engagement. So we remind people that you may not know everything. We strive to enhance our communications and our outreach, and so that we're updating folks, but there is a deep engagement around all of the things that are offered. Next slide, please. And so here, just as some of the challenges to present to you, can see in that kind of chart at the top there, how we're tracking this year over the prior year. Total items borrowed continues to tick up, and there's a 61% increase there over the prior year. Visits the same, going up incrementally at 7%. Classes, a big jump there, and this is the classes that we offer, the number of classes offered, and you'll see class attendance under that. So it's pretty much if we build it, they will come. And so we're always stretched in making sure that we are trying to build enough to really meet the demand. You'll see some of the challenges there, and it's definitely in resources and space. Insufficient materials to meet community demand and engagement of our highly educated community. And this is one we share with you year over year. Our community has longer wait times, and we spend more money in some cases and just do without. Materials collections, there are deep wait lists, and I'll give you some examples of this on the next slide. There's insufficient space, not only for the community, but also for us in programming our classes. So on some days where we have more staff capacity to do some more things, there just isn't the space to actually do them. Next slide, please. You'll see here just an example, representative example of what the holds lists look like when somebody goes to our catalog to look for a book, and they can see the number of items that we have, copies of an item, and they can also see the number of holds on that item, right? So you'll see there for a hard copy of Oath and Honor, we've got 40 copies of it, but we've got 158 requests for it, right? Not counting the 40 people that have it in hand. And of course, these are dynamic, they change every day. Ebooks, right? So we also have a large community that engages with us electronically, and there are 545 copies if you're trying to get it in an e-edition. Importantly, while our collections budget does continue to increase year over year, it's not growing at the pace of customer demand or the pace of publisher increases. And those publisher increases are a big thing, right? Our publishers, our big five, continue to swallow up larger or smaller publishing houses and have the ability to put those increases in place. And we do know that publishers charge public libraries, because we are lending to the public, at much higher rates than they do an individual consumer. So for instance, an ebook that you would buy from Barnes & Noble or Amazon for $20 could cost us upwards of $90. So it is a huge difference in the cost that we pay. Next slide, please. Here you'll see our FY25 operating budget proposal. We are requesting an increase of 4.57%. This is in staff for merit and COLA only. We're not asking for any new positions, and that's both at 3%. In our contracts, Object 2, we're not asking for an increase there. Curriculum is where our books come from, and so that increase there is to address those deep hold and wait lists, especially for time-bound requests related to student material, so that's at 19%. And then professional development. We had taken professional development down during the pandemic, where we weren't traveling and weren't sending staff to conferences. Like most agencies, we've had a large turnover of folks who chose to retire either during the pandemic or after the pandemic. Have a lot of new staff that we'd love to get trained up in various ways, and so asking to increase that professional development budget. And then no increase in Object 5, which is our equipment budget, both technology and furniture. Next slide, please. And let's see, Angela, can we hear you better now?
I think you can. Can you hear me?
I can. So Angela will present capital. Angela.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Not being heard is not one of my problems usually. So I apologize to everybody on the call. Capital budget, we look at the central branch, that continues to be our central focus this upcoming FY25. As we look at where the current branch is, you may be familiar with it. We've talked about this slide before, and it's the same issues that we've had with the branch for several years, and that is that, number one, we know that the current site is going to be used for alternative spaces. The class space, as Tony has mentioned, we have an increase in classes and in attendance, which then leaves a lot of our class space with wait lists, and it leaves it so that we can't schedule some of the classes we'd like for that area. We also know that it doesn't meet the minimum requirements for space in terms of per capita. There's a 1-to-1, so we really are running a little bit low in that area. We know there's a huge population growth coming for downtown, and so currently we know there's a bigger demand on our community space. There's going to be a bigger demand on our collection, and we really need a space to match the diversity and the growth of downtown. As you think about our buildings, Antonio showed how our visits are growing, our materials are being checked out. We are really an integral part of the community. And so our branches are really where a lot of people call it home. They come, they listen, they learn, they grow. Our spaces for the meeting rooms are where other community groups come and really can pursue their goals and their mission. And so these challenges that we see at the central branch continue to create a problem at that branch. Next slide. So part of what's going on downtown, we've talked about this before, the library anticipating the growth downtown and looking at all of Howard County, looking at our services and what do we provide and what the community is interested in. We, in 2019, embarked on a mission to update our master plan. So we brought on G4 Architecture, Research and Planning, a group that really specializes, that is their bellywick, to look at growth, to look at library systems, to look at capacity, and talk about and really look to see what we can do. In that, they concurred with the library system. You were fine on that slide. The next slide. They did see that where we would do a new 100,000 square foot downtown branch, which is in line with what the library plans were, but we wanted to check to make sure that we really were getting the best and most current advice. As we look downtown and we look at the centrally located of having public education for all, a library that will accommodate the neighborhood and the needs of all the population that's growing, we really started to look at what does this mean in terms of opportunities? What does this mean in terms of what the county has, spoken to us about and what they envision and what the community has told us most importantly. So we held a lot of charrettes, and from 2019, even as current as 2023, and really gathered information from the public. As you may know, we applied for, or at least submitted for funding for the branch. We did get some state funding last year. Governor Moore was very gracious, and his team and the state delegation, and put $10 million aside for this project to sort of start all the work that we had to begin. As we went through the process, it became clear that there was some additional information that the county departments needed to work on. And so at the request of the county council, the county departments, DPW specifically, and the county executive's office, his team, not him specifically, but his team is really looking at the space, the site, and looking forward to doing some analysis and involving the community. That's the phase one of their analysis of this project. So they've been working on it. Right now, they have identified what's called an owner rep. That's sort of like a project manager. And they've been having some meetings, and we hope to hear more from them very soon. At this point, because we know the county is working, those departments are working and doing some analysis, the Howard County Board has really just requested a release of the funds from they're held in contingency. That's what we hope to do in the new year. So with that, we'll go to the next slide.
That's the last
I think
one.
that's
Yep,
it.
that is the last one. Okay. I thought the last one just said the end on it, but that is the end of what it's about capital projects. At this time, we'll turn it over to questions, Holly, if that's okay.
Yeah, please. Thank you. Thank you, Tonya, and also Angela. Any questions from the committee? Please make sure unmute yourself. Let me just check to make sure there's nothing in the chat box.
As far as I can tell, we're good on chat.
Okay, I think we're fine.
Okay.
Oh, Barbara, I had you early. Oh, no, she's not there anymore. Okay, all right. Thank you all very much then.
Thank you, Holly, and thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Good information. And I think with us there are Jared, right? Will represent community college. Would you like me to put it on the screen for you?
If you guys can hear me, I think I can share it.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Let's see.
Very nice to have you, by the way. Thank you.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you. So you can all can see the presentation, okay?
Yes, we can see it. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. And I will try to be beholden to our time and keep us in line with a slightly bit ahead of schedule. So thank you, members of the committee, for allowing HCC to give you a brief overview of some of our spending and priorities. Let's see if I can get. There we go. You are familiar or should be familiar with our mission, vision, values, and goals. We look as the anchor institution for Howard County, educating more than 20,000 plus students of all ages across the lifespan, and credit bearing and non-credit bearing courses and workforce development to be an economic anchor and a cultural hub for the county. What makes us great, obviously, the experience we provide, our goal to drive students to success, and the partnerships that we create towards that end. You can see that our student enrollment as of fall 23 is majority part-time students. And that's, again, across the lifespan for a student population that is exceptionally busy and has their attention diverted by family, by work, who are just trying to get a foothold in career aspirations and pathway building. And so we're very proud of the fact that we can be a part of that calculus for so many families across the county. 38%, or almost four out of every 10 college students coming from Howard County attends HCC. A large portion of that is comprised of our dual enrollment programs, our Jump Start, where we have high school students who are simultaneously enrolled in HCPSS and also involved with HCC coursework. And we hope to build those transitional opportunities for those students to enroll full-time and complete degrees at HCC and be on their way to four-year degree completion. The top destinations for many of our transfer students, you can see we remain in state with College Park, Towson, and UMBC. Business model that we have, and I know that you're familiar with this, and part of it is very, very powerful, but also creates some stigma that we work very hard to show that we're an institution of choice and flexibility. But the open access mission and the diverse learning options create sort of an environment where people at varying levels of academic readiness and maturity and experience can still feel welcome and still feel part of an academic community that is built on scholarship and character building. Our operating budget, you can see our sources of funding over a select decade between 2016 and 2025, largely comprised of state and county investment, along with tuition and fees, and then some of our ancillary income. And if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to stop me. But I assume that you guys are quick readers, and so I don't want to belabor the time. We look at our FTE funding ratios as our unduplicated FTE count. And you can see over another select decade between FY14 and 2023, how our funding is shaped out between state and county investment, as well as the tuition dollars afforded by our students. Our revenue by source, you will see, again, with the state and county comprising the largest portions of what we have to serve our student population, and our auxiliary revenue, which is capped in certain ways, but it's certainly growing here at HCC as we look at expanding opportunities for branding and growing enrollment and getting more of those partnerships I talked about before and corporate investments to come along with the great things that we're doing here in Dragon Country. Our revenue trends, you can see that the county has been very, very kind to us, particularly in the years following COVID, and making for a 5-year average that is just under 4%. So again, we are very grateful to our partners in county government, the Ball administration, and so many folks across agencies who help us to achieve that goal, and our elected officials. From the state perspective, you will see the up and down on percentage increases in the budget, and it was just in 23 where we were able to meet CADE funding, which is a historic aspiration for the state to make sure that all community colleges of 16 in our universe are able to receive 29% of the funding per FTE. This was something that took a number of years to get to. And even in this year's budget recommendations made by Governor Moore, that dropped down from 29 to 26% for HCC. That represents about a 4% cut that will be under consideration. And even though the governor has been super kind to us, has been here on a number of occasions, has really lifted up HCC and Howard County as a model for what community colleges can do for citizens and residents. We understand that that's measured up against budget austerity, what the state has to do to continue to be a leader for the nation and to thrive in a number of areas. One interesting thing to note about those funding trends, that as the funding and the investment varies, you will see that increases have helped us or have matched enrollment growth. Since COVID, HCC has grown in our unduplicated headcount and our combined credit and non-credit students. Over the last 5 years, that represents about a 26% decrease. But you will see between 22 and 23 that we are slowly starting to get those students back, and particularly in the credit-bearing areas. And the same thing for the FTE growth that is state funded in credit and non-credit. And even though that number is showcasing a decrease, this matches some of the funding trends that we've seen over the years. The more you invest, the more investment that community colleges can reach, the more students that we're able to market to and support in maintaining degree matriculation. Our college finances, they are strong today, again, because of the relatively sustained support of the state and the county, and particularly the county. But we know that there are changes soon to come, not just for HCC, but higher education at large. We know that birth rates are decreasing. Fewer people are making the decision to pursue college degrees. Maryland is one of those states across the country where that projected decreases is going to be among the more dramatic, because we're also among the nation's best in sending students on to higher education. So that precipitous drop is going to impact us in a sound way. And we are preparing for that. We're looking across the academic enterprise and the operations to make sure that we are doing our best as stewards of the public trust to make sure that we're spending wisely, that we are cutting where necessary, and that we're able to use our labor, our technology, and our support systems to more efficiently serve students. And we hope that demonstration allows for more investment, a closer look by our state and county partners to help us manage those talent resources and advance our mission. Total operating expenditures for fiscal year 25. You can see how Our budget expenditures go by object. Again, the largest portion of what we do is salaries and benefits for our faculty and staff. Those little slices that you see are a big part of what supports students in the way of equipment, utilities, the communications, and contracted services. So you can tell that, like most colleges, we are highly dependent on our workforce to help us get the job done of helping students to achieve and communities to achieve. And this is another breakdown of how that support looks across the academic enterprise, with instruction and student services and institutional support being the largest portions of that pie. Our capital budget, we are intimately focused on our Workforce Development and Skilled Trade Center, which will open in 2026. If you haven't heard about it, I'm going to be at your door soon because this is a huge project, not just for our campus community, but for the county at large. You can see here at the bottom a number of the trades that we already offer and some of the new trades, particularly in the green work skilled trades areas like green technology and cybersecurity. These are going to be the jobs of the future. And given our geographic location to national security, to the federal government, these are going to be some high grossing, highly recruitable jobs that our county and our city and our campus is going to be at the forefront of producing that talent and making sure that those students are able to be credentialed, that they're able to get security clearances, and that they'll be at the first in line, and Howard County will be one of the leaders across Maryland and across the country in making sure that talent is ready and accessible for employers in the public and private sector. You know that workforce development and trades are key for a diverse cross section of our citizenry. Even though Howard County is exceptional, and I have to give credit to Superintendent Barnes and his team for the way that we lead the country in making sure that our focus on K through 12 success and college attainment is maintained year to year, even with demographic shifts and resource challenges. HCPSS does such a wonderful job of making sure that students are well positioned for success and that their professionals are highly attracted to stay and be retained to get the job done. But we know that college isn't for everybody, so we know that workforce development and career technical education is critical to that. We know that these are industries. If you've ever tried to call for an electrician or a plumber lately, and you know the cost for that service, and you know the wait time for that service, you can tell just how needed these skills and these professions are. So we want to be at the forefront of making sure that you don't have to take a day off to wait all day for a plumber that's going to cost you about $300 an hour. So you can count on HCC to be a part of that convenience building, not for our community, but more so to promote affluence and prosperity for families across the community. We like to think of the Trade Center as an anti-poverty racial equity tool for the county and for the state of Maryland. And the investments that the county will make and that the state will make will help our county to attract that talent and retain it. So hopefully that those folks that go on to be credentialed and become entrepreneurs and are able to work in some of these high grossing skilled trades will remain in Howard County and contribute to our tax base. Our funding requests, as you can see in area 4 on this sheet, we look at about $5 million from the county. We are grateful for the commitment from County Executive Ball for 10 over the next 2 fiscal years. This will not only go for construction and completion of the facility, but we are also working to raise resources to make sure that we have the technology, that we have the personnel that will be able to work in the facility, and to make sure that all of the apportionment that's necessary to hit the ground running in 2026 is in place. You may have heard that in October of last year, we launched a capital campaign, an $11 million capital campaign to raise resources for that. Over the last several months, we've raised almost $500,000 in pledges and actual donations. So we're well on our way, working with a committee of highly respected business leaders in the county and outside of our county borders to make sure that we achieve that goal and make good being able to match the commitment of the state and the county to constructing this center. Doing so is preventing us from missing opportunity for years. And this is something that our original president talked about, the need for workforce development and the creation of HCC so much of our talent that wants to work in HVAC and plumbing and electrical and construction management, they have to go outside of Howard County to get the hands-on training. We can do a good job of giving them the foundational work and helping them understand what it's going to take for licensure and things like that. But the actual hands-on training is necessary to be here and located in Columbia, not just as a matter of convenience for a lot of our students, but so that they are more conducive to complete their certification. As you can see, we compete heavily with a local for-profit institution. I think some of you may know who that is. I won't bother to mention the name, but that's very costly for our students just in an area like HVAC and electrical systems technology. And we work very hard with partners like AT&T and other industries. Howard General Hospital is another one for surgical technology, where we can provide apprenticeships for a number of our students at no cost. So they're able to get that work experience, paid internships through our paid apprenticeships, through our partnerships. And this investment will only broaden that perspective in a number of areas. You know that we are strong in nursing, we're strong in surgical technology and dental hygiene. We're strong in cybersecurity and construction management. We want to be a national leader in that perspective. And you can see some of the areas of Maryland where Howard County, which has not had a workforce development center, go where our students go to get that hands-on training. So how much of that revenue is leaving Howard County because people are working, potentially moving to other areas to get the training, get the jobs in those areas? How much of that could we keep here as a revenue creation opportunity for the county? How much of that could we create as a tax base? How much of that could we create as college students who not only get the workforce training opportunities, but then may transfer that over to get business degrees, lease and buying property in our area. So we just view this as an opportunity, not just to broaden HCC's footprint and its market share with students, but this truly will be an opportunity for a lot of our county to benefit economically and our employers. We hear all the time from our campaign committee members how difficult it is to get talent into the workforce and to hire and keep good talent. And so we look to be a remedy to that problem. Pennsylvania is one of those areas that is recruiting talent from our area, and students that are willing to drive up there for the training. That shouldn't be. That shouldn't be at cost to be able to make a better life for yourself and your family. We don't want to miss those opportunities. We want to keep them right at home. So you can see the phases that we are looking to implement investment from Howard County and the partnership that we have with EcoWorks. It's a necessary capital resource that we can use to meet the demand, as I just spoke about, from our students who are looking to get those credentials and our employers in the area. And just to round out my presentation, our graduates earn approximately more than $350,000 over a lifetime than somebody with a diploma or a GED. This shows you the return on investment, not just for the student investment, but for Howard County taxpayers and the economic impact, obviously, of 4,600 jobs and $343 million. So you can tell that why this is our priority, why this is something that we're eager to talk about all the time, and why we are looking for the county's partnership and investment and forward thinking and strategic vision for this being a part of our economic outlay. So with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you very much. Excellent. So our committee members, do anybody have questions? Please just make sure unmute yourself. Very comprehensive coverage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, Dr. Carter, I mean, I'm so glad to hear that that the HVAC trade program is now up and running, because my youngest son is actually in the for-profit neighboring county 3 years in, and it was very disheartening that he had to go to another county because it wasn't offered. So I guess mine is more of a statement than a question. Are you looking to expand more of the trade type of things in the college system, or what are you doing with that? HVAC was a big one for him.
Yes.
But his buddies were going into electricians or plumbing and So are you expanding that program now, or?
Yes. So what this center will do is physically put on campus the workspace for those students to be trained right here in Howard County. So you won't have to go to another county. When you take your courses here, you will elevate to the next step, and we will have laboratories for automotive, mechanical, and cybersecurity. You know, we already have partnerships with the county to build that cybersecurity as a tech hub. So that you'll be hearing more about that in future weeks and months. But it's going to be right here on campus. And in fact, when you drive in from Little Patuxent, it's going to be the biggest building on campus. It'll be the 50,000 square foot facility. That'll be the biggest thing that you see from the front entrance of our campus. And that will dictate how serious we are about workforce trades and how serious we are about students who are graduating from HCPSS who have options that some might not be ready for a 4-year degree. Some might not want a 4-year degree, but they do deserve higher education. They do deserve opportunities to create a good life for themselves and high earnings, and we're going to deliver that.
Well, I'll applaud you that you went to that direction. But I hate to say better late than never, but I just really wish it came a little bit sooner. But I'm sure our community definitely needs that, though.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
We appreciate your support. Thank you.
Great discussion. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, Jared.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think I just want to close by saying that we got some really great speakers today, and we have very comprehensive coverage of different education system there here and in the county, and also very to the point. And there's also a lot of great questions from the committee. So that's very helpful in terms of help inform the committee in developing the final recommendations or findings that going to inform the county in developing the both FY25 budget and also the long-term projections there. So extremely helpful. I would say that next week, we actually, just a kind reminder, next week, our SSC meeting is not on Wednesday. It's actually on the 29th, which is Monday, same time, 3 to 5 o'clock. At that point, we will be looking forward to two presentations from the two economists in our committee, Dr. Irani and Dr. Clinch. That's also going to be a very interesting topic and directly linked to our fiscal outlook there. So we look forward to that. We might also, depending on how much information available, share some of the update on the fees, which is both challenge and also opportunity there. So we look forward to discussion next Monday. So if no other questions there, we're going to adjourn the meeting today a little bit ahead of schedule, which is wonderful. Thanks everyone for your participation. Really appreciate it.